I threw away my career, my marriage, and my daughter for a man who empties trash cans. 6 months ago, I was Dr. Amanda Chen, respected literature professor with tenure track at a prestigious university. Now I'm just another woman who lost everything because she confused recklessness with feeling alive. Hi, I'm Amanda, 34. I was married to David, 36M, for 8 years, together for 10. We have a daughter, Lily, who just turned 18 months old. Had a daughter. David has full custody now. The janitor's name was Miguel. He was maybe 28, high school education, worked nights cleaning our humanities building. I was pulling late hours grading papers and preparing lectures while dealing with severe postpartum depression. David was supportive but buried in his own demanding job as a financial analyst. It started during one of my lowest points. I'd been staying at the office until midnight most nights, avoiding going home to face another sleepless night with a crying baby and a husband who expected me to have everything under control because I was supposedly the smart one. Miguel would come by my office around 11 to empty the waste baskets. He'd knock softly, smile, ask if I needed anything. Small kindnesses that felt enormous when I was running on 3 hours of sleep and constant anxiety about failing as a mother and professor. I was drowning in new motherhood while trying to maintain my career momentum. David meant well, but he'd never understood the pressure I felt to prove myself in academia. The constant fear that having a baby would derail everything I'd worked for since graduate school. Miguel started lingering after emptying my trash. Making small talk about books on my shelves, asking about my research. He was curious about literature in ways my academic colleagues weren't anymore. To them, it was all theory and career advancement. To him, stories mattered because they meant something. I started looking forward to his visits. This sweet, genuine man who thought what I did was fascinating instead of taking it for granted. Who asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. David and I barely talked anymore except about Lily's schedule and household logistics. He'd come home exhausted, I'd hand him the baby, and we'd exist in parallel until bedtime. The romance and intellectual connection that brought us together had evaporated under the weight of diapers and mortgage payments and career stress. Miguel asked me to coffee after 3 weeks of these late-night conversations. I said yes without thinking about consequences. Just coffee with someone who made me feel human again instead of just a milk-producing, lecture-delivering machine. We talked for 4 hours at a 24-hour diner. He told me about growing up in El Salvador, coming here as a teenager, working multiple jobs to send money home to his family. I told him about feeling lost in motherhood, like I disappeared as a person and become just a collection of roles and responsibilities. When he kissed me in the parking lot, every rational thought in my head shut off. For the first time in months, I felt like Amanda instead of Dr. Chen or Mommy or David's wife. I felt alive. We started meeting regularly. Always late at night after his shift ended. Cheap motels, his studio apartment, sometimes even my office after hours. I told David the first was working on a research project with tight deadlines. Miguel made me feel young and spontaneous and beautiful. He'd bring me flowers from the grocery store and write little notes in broken English about how amazing I was. David brought home takeout and asked if I'd remembered to schedule Lily's pediatrician appointment. The contrast felt stark. Miguel saw me as this fascinating, accomplished woman worth pursuing. David saw me as his wife who'd become stressed and distant since having the baby. Both perspectives were probably true, but Miguel's felt better. I started taking risks. Leaving my wedding ring in my office drawer during the day. Texting Miguel from home while David watched TV. Meeting him for lunch sometimes instead of just late-night hookups. The thrill of potentially getting caught became part of the addiction. One afternoon, I brought Lily to campus with me because our babysitter canceled. Miguel was working a day shift and saw us in the hallway. He was sweet with her, making funny faces that made her giggle. For a moment, I fantasized about what life could be like with someone who chose to be with me instead of someone who'd settled into comfortable routine. That's when I knew I was in too deep. When I started imagining Miguel as part of my real life instead of just an escape from it, the fantasy crashed into reality when David hired a private investigator. He'd noticed my changed behavior, the late nights, the way I'd started caring about my appearance again. Found out about the motel receipts and restaurant charges that didn't match my supposed work schedule. David confronted me with photos of Miguel and me together. Professional surveillance pictures that made our relationship look exactly as sordid as it was. A respected professor sneaking around with a night janitor like some ridiculous cliché. I broke down and confessed everything. Told David the first been miserable and Miguel made me feel alive again. That I'd lost myself in motherhood and needed someone who saw me as more than just a mother and wife. David listened without interrupting. Then he asked if I was planning to leave him for Miguel. I said I didn't know. That I needed time to figure out what I wanted. That's when he told me he was filing for divorce and seeking full custody of Lily. I laughed at first. Told him no judge would take a baby away from her mother over an affair. That I was a good mom who'd just made some personal mistakes. David calmly explained that he had documentation of my behavior. Photos of me drinking with Miguel when I was supposed to be working. Evidence that I'd been neglecting Lily's care schedule because I was distracted by the affair. Records showing I'd missed multiple pediatrician appointments and hadn't been responding to daycare calls because I was with Miguel. The worst part was when he showed me the photo of Lily and me at campus with Miguel. David's lawyer argued it showed I was exposing our daughter to my affair partner, demonstrating poor judgment, and putting my selfish desires above her safety and stability. When I ran to Miguel for support, he panicked. Said he never meant for this to happen, that he couldn't be responsible for breaking up my family. He'd been thinking about his own job security, worried that news of our relationship would get him fired. Within a week, Miguel had requested a transfer to a different building. Said we needed to stop seeing each other until things calmed down. I begged him not to abandon me when my world was falling apart, but he was already pulling away. That's when I realized how naive I'd been. Miguel had enjoyed the excitement of being with a professor, someone above his usual social circle. But when it came to actually dealing with consequences, he wasn't ready to sacrifice anything real for me. I was. I'd already sacrificed everything. Empties trash cans. It's been 6 months since the custody hearing. Lily lives with David full-time now. I get supervised visits twice a week for 2 hours each. A court-appointed monitor sits in the corner taking notes while I play with my own daughter like I'm a stranger who might hurt her. The divorce was brutal but straightforward. David got the house, primary custody, and most of our assets. I got debt from legal fees and a reputation that followed me everywhere in our small academic community. The university started an investigation into my conduct after word spread about the affair. Sleeping with staff wasn't technically against policy, but my colleagues suddenly viewed me differently. The brilliant young professor became the woman who threw away her career for the janitor. I wasn't fired, but I wasn't renewed either. Academic positions are political, and scandal makes you unemployable. 10 years of graduate school, publications, conference presentations, and networking destroyed because I couldn't handle the stress of new motherhood without seeking validation elsewhere. Miguel disappeared completely after the custody hearing. Transferred to a different university campus across town. I drove by his apartment once and saw a moving truck. He'd left without saying goodbye, probably relieved to escape the mess I'd made of both our lives. I don't blame him anymore. He was a young guy working multiple jobs who got involved with a married professor going through a crisis. When things got complicated, he did what anyone would do and protected himself. I was the one with everything to lose who chose to risk it anyway. David remarried 8 months after our divorce was finalized. Stephanie is a pediatric nurse he met through work connections. She's kind and stable and probably never fantasizes about throwing her life away for excitement. Lily calls her mama Steph now. Watching another woman mother my daughter is torture, but I can't argue with the stability they provide. Lily has a consistent routine, a clean house, 2 parents who prioritize her needs above their own desires. Everything I failed to give her when I was too busy chasing feelings and validation. The supervised visits are the worst part. Lily doesn't understand why I only see her twice a week for short periods. She cries when I have to leave, reaching for me while the monitor explains that visit time is over. David and Stephanie are kind about transitions, but I can see the pity in their eyes. I moved to a small apartment near campus and took a job at the community college teaching basic composition courses. The pay is terrible compared to what I was making, but it's the only academic work I could find with my reputation. My former colleagues avoid me at professional conferences. Not out of malice, but because my situation makes them uncomfortable. I represent their worst fears about work-life balance and the consequences of poor choices. Dr. Patterson, my therapist, asks why I was willing to risk so much for someone I barely knew. The honest answer is that I wasn't thinking about consequences. I was drowning in postpartum depression and sleep deprivation and grabbed onto the first thing that made me feel human again. Miguel represented everything my life with David wasn't. Spontaneous instead of scheduled. Passionate instead of practical. Romantic instead of routine. I convinced myself those feelings meant something profound instead of recognizing them as temporary escape from responsibilities I'd chosen. The irony is that I thought the affair made me feel alive, but it actually killed everything that mattered in my life. My marriage wasn't perfect, but it was loving and stable. David wasn't exciting, but he was loyal and supportive and committed to building something lasting together. I traded partnership for passion and ended up with neither. The hardest part is accepting that I did this to myself. David didn't neglect me or abuse me or give me reason to look elsewhere. I was struggling with new motherhood and instead of seeking help or communicating my needs, I found someone who made me feel better temporarily. I could have suggested marriage counseling. Could have been honest about my postpartum depression. Could have asked David for more support or understanding. Instead, I started an affair with someone who couldn't possibly provide the stability and partnership I actually needed. Miguel was never going to be a stepfather to Lily or help me advance my career or build a future with me. He was a young man with his own problems who enjoyed the attention of an older, accomplished woman. When that attention became complicated, he moved on. I see Lily every Tuesday and Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m. We play with toys in a sterile room while a social worker documents our interactions. Lily has David's eyes and my stubborn streak. She's walking now, saying a few words, becoming a little person with preferences and personality. I missed most of her development milestones because I was too busy feeling sorry for myself and seeking validation from someone who was never going to be part of our lives long term. David sends me pictures sometimes. Lily at the park with him and Stephanie. Her first birthday party that I wasn't invited to. Christmas morning in their beautiful house that used to be our beautiful house. I don't resent them anymore. They're giving Lily the stable, loving home she deserves. The home I could have provided if I'd focused on fixing my problems instead of running from them. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never started talking to Miguel. If I'd gone straight home after work instead of staying late to avoid dealing with my depression. If I'd been honest with David about struggling instead of pretending everything was fine, we'd probably still be married. Lily would be sleeping in her own bedroom instead of visiting me under supervision. I'd be Dr. Chen instead of the cautionary tale other professors whisper about at faculty meetings, but there's no point in what-ifs. I made my choices and now I live with the consequences. The brief feeling of being alive cost me everything that actually made life worth living. The community college students don't know my history. To them, I'm just Professor Chen who teaches freshman composition and keeps to herself. Sometimes I see Miguel's face in young men who remind me of him, but the memory doesn't hurt anymore. It just feels like something that happened to someone else. My lawyer says I can petition for increased visitation when Lily turns 3, but only if I demonstrate consistent stability and responsibility. No relationships, steady employment, clean living. The basics of adulthood I somehow forgot while chasing feelings. I'm working toward that goal, but not because I think I deserve my daughter back. Because she deserves a mother who prioritizes her well-being above temporary feelings and selfish desires. Some mistakes can't be undone, only learned from. I felt alive for 3 months and have spent every day since learning what death feels like.